Tang Sui, who wore the Shinshin Impact Shell of the Yin Yang Master game to Douluo, was also very desperate today because her biological brother was Tang San, who held the script for the tragic protagonist Meiqiang, while she seemed to have a weak and sickly canon fodder script. The kind that doesn't survive even a single episode. Tang Mian Lingqi Shell Sui. Today is also a mask of pain. System. Hehe, come and upgrade. Cut the number. Come and expand. So Tang Sui gritted her teeth and picked up the Shishen skill upgrade, but unconsciously, leading group. Dare to hurt Sui. I have raised all the ashes for you. Ha. This wave. Seems to be a group pet script. The female protagonist's ability setting is an alternative face spiritual energy, with 3 perspectives, and asking is a private setting. Do not dismantle the official configuration, do not like it, do not criticize it. Refuse harsh comments, various writing guidance, and personal harm. This article is only for kicking out regrets and fulfilling wishes. Keywords of the novel. Douluo. Winning a stable group pet script after reincarnation with no pop-ups. Douluo. Winning a stable group pet script after reincarnation. Download the complete set of TXT. Douluo. Winning a stable group pet script after reincarnation. Read the latest chapter of the script. Chapter 1. Is gold flower fried? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Is gold flower fried? Boom boom. Giant vibrations kept coming from the forest. The originally lush forest seemed to have been ravaged by some terrifying force, and wherever it passed, it was covered in broken wood and ash, turning into a wasteland full of scars, leaving only terrifying and profound traces of battle, indicating the intense battle situation. Surrounded by several red-robed men wearing golden armor, the blond man with white golden armor stood up holding a light golden longsword. His red cloak was blown up by the strong wind, and he hunted against the sound of the wind. Tang Hao. You have no way out now. If you surrender your 100,000-year soul beast, I can spare your life. He took a small step forward, his golden boots weighing like 1,000 pounds, directly tearing the earthquake beneath his feet into a web of scars. This is a blatant threat. The threatened man was soaked in blood all over, holding a black giant hammer that was even larger than his strong body. Even though he could no longer stand and half knelt on the ground with 1 foot, he remained like a guardian deity, steadfastly blocking the woman holding 2 babies in swaddling clothes. A terrifying pressure was released, making the threatening party stare at their every move with fear. Even if victory is right in front of them, and the prey seems to have lost the power of battle, they still hesitate to move forward. Because the person standing in front of them is Tang Hao, one of the Haotian sect twin stars who, relying on his soul Douluo strength, has reaped several soul Douluo level powerhouses on his own, Tang Hao. Haoga. The woman, who was protected by a man behind her, had a worried expression in her eyes. She looked at the resolute figure blocking her back, and her gaze crossed over the man, landing on the entangled enemies. She hugged her swaddled hand with a slight force, and a hint of sadness and hesitation flashed in her eyes. Ah! The childish and monotonous babbling of a baby echoed from her arms, carrying a hint of hoarseness and weakness. D. Warning! Warning! The host's health is about to reach the endangered point. The unfamiliar mechanical sound system started, but no one showed a surprised expression. Both sides remained deadlocked, and no one refused to step back. Children Ayan lowered her head, her emotions changing for a moment. She lifted her head and looked at the wounds left on Tang Hao's body in the fierce battle just now, as well as the blood gushing out from the churning and blurry flesh, red and black, indicating that he had been poisoned. They are already at the end of their rope. The crystal clear water color flashed by, and Ayan took a deep breath. She took the initiative to step forward and infused her soul power into her voice, expanding it. Stop it. I'm willing to go back with you. When he said these words, the golden and blue silver emperor flew out of the air from his wrist, tightly wrapping the swaddling clothes of the two children in his arms, with a resilient blue-silver emperor connected in the middle, like a connecting hub. Ah-in. Tang Hao was startled and suddenly turned around, only to see his wife walking up to him. He squatted down and hung both children on him. As long as I come with you, you will let Hauge go, right? With her back to the enemy, she asked softly again. The people in red robes looked at each other and exchanged a secret look. They cleared their throat and said, yes. As long as you surrender, we won't harm your lives. This is it. Yin stood up and looked at her restless lover with a soothing expression. A silver-blue halo filled her eyes, and a divine and powerful energy field burst out from her center, causing everyone to take several steps back unexpectedly. This is. She's going to sacrifice. Stop her now. A sharp voice suddenly sounded, and the crowd in red robes became restless. They drew out their weapons and used their powerful soul skills to approach the two of them. But it's already too late. No. Time seems to be infinitely stretched. Tang Hao, who was given a spot by his wife and also had two children hanging on him who couldn't move, had bloodshot eyes that widened with disbelief and despair. His rough face was covered in scars and blood, and a hoarse voice choked up from his throat. No. No. Ah-in. Stop it. You go with them. Hauge. A yin soul power began to surge towards Tang Hao, covered in a layer of silver-blue halo, and her figure also began to become transparent. Only the smile hanging at the corner of her mouth remained Tang Hao's familiar tranquility. I'll leave the child to you. The body, riddled with wounds and holes, began to heat up, and a powerful energy filled all four limbs. The exhausted soul power ran wild, like a traveler in the desert who finally found an oasis, crazily absorbing the source of life. No. A blood-red soul ring emerged from Tang Hao's feet, with circles of black or purple soul rings immediately below, indicating the fact that he had been promoted to the rank of Douluo. Ah-in. Don't leave me. Tang Hao, who was cohesive, finally broke free from his wife's constraints and couldn't wait to reach out his hand, wanting to hold on to her and hold on to that smile. Farewell, my beloved. Scattered fluorescent blue dots brushed through the gaps between his fingers, and a single ball of light inadvertently slipped into his collar, leaving nothing else behind. Agile Tang Hao's already blood-oozing and turbid pupils immediately caught an ominous black and terrifying aura, and he said word by word, I, you, us, blood, debt, blood, compensation. The powerful momentum unique to the title Douluo exploded, shaking against the two grass bracts hanging around his neck by a tough blue-silver emperor. D. Detected that the host's health has reached an endangered point, activate mandatory hosting mode. The last cold mechanical ending fell, and the air suddenly shook. Buzz. The black light film burst out from Tang Hao's body, and everyone was suddenly given a sudden burst of terrifying power in mid-air, maintaining their original movements. However, their soul power no longer operated, and no matter how they called and urged, it remained as calm as stagnant water, without any response. What's going on? Suspected and uncertain, the void shrouded in black light film opens up shallow ripples. Ha! A black and golden erect pupil, unlike a human, opened in a surging black tide, like a ferocious beast lurking in the dark, finally revealing its fangs. It was cold and fierce, staring at these prey that had entered the net. A more profound and terrifying aura pressed down on everyone than just now, even Tang Hao, who had just been promoted to the title Douluo and was at the peak of his soul power, let out a muffled groan and stared closely at the eye that suddenly appeared with a black mist. The alarm in his mind sounded wildly, shouting danger. What kind of thing is this? The blond man's face, adorned with compassion and pride, could no longer maintain its appearance, revealing fear and apprehension. Because he could feel his divine six-winged angel soul trembling violently, as if encountering a natural enemy. Do you want to fry golden flowers? The mechanical voice smiled and spoke unheard words. The next second, the black and golden pupils slowly shifted their gaze to the blond man and his companions. Before the blond man could defend with his backhand, the black and red halo suddenly swung open. Invisible forces scraped through the air, deafening explosions exploding in the air, occupying all view. Hurry up! The sound of explosion suppressed the heart-wrenching sobering sound, and Tang Hao, who inexplicably felt a hint of palpitations, suddenly shrank his pupils. He quickly picked up his Haotian hammer, quickly retreated, and disappeared into the storm dust and explosion buzzing that covered the sky. Off topic. It's been a while since I last saw you. Emily has returned with the new text. I was originally pursuing anime, but when I saw that Senior Qin Ming was really dying, I burst into tears and angrily opened a new article. Edible reminder in this article. This article is a growth-oriented female frequency article, not a typical refreshing article. If you want to read mindless refreshing, please click on the cross and see you again. Other old rules, don't rely on evidence. OOC belongs to me, asking is a private setting, unless it is a bug. This time, neither pair of CPs will be dismantled. The opening of the article is just to kick out the regrettable bento and achieve a complete ending. Those who are extremely picky and provocative will directly cross it out. The CP of the female goose is uncertain, and it may be unique throughout the process, depending on the situation. Sweet pet Su Shuangwen, happiness is right. Please describe as much as possible that no one is black. The main ink carp knows that some villains can also be non-villains, but if there are no villains and enemies, where can they turn the tables and change their lives? Later on, it may not necessarily follow the path of destroying the martial soul hall. Don't pull or trample, don't lead a battle. You, me, and him have the same quality. Although speech is your freedom, how to manage my comments section is my freedom. The foreshadowing setting of the female goose is personality, which can be seen from the buried line. The hidden line rises to the surface in the plot of Tang Hao angrily smashing the Pope's palace, fully indicating the plot of the Sea God Island. Please turn your clever little brain. Long digressions are all additional words and will not be charged. The concept of group pet in this article is somewhat unique, with the innovation centered around I spoil myself, also known as golden finger named Jingfen, which is not a universal trend of group pet. Finally, do not raise your QAQ, as it can lead to death. Take a daily card and sign it, quietly. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Selection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Selection. The thin mist shrouded, and the sunlight was like strands of golden sand, passing through the overlapping tree shadows, casting mottled spots of light and landing on the moist land. The warm sunshine melted the heavy mist in the forest, and new dewdrops hung on the emerald green branches and leaves, flowing down the veins of the leaves and finally dripping onto the hair of a simple-dressed little boy with black hair and pupils. Like an activated mechanism, the little boy opened his eyes and a faint purple light flashed through them, quickly disappearing into the depths of his eyes. It's already this time. The little boy looked up and saw the sunrise climbing towards the top in the distance. He stood up, patted the grass scraps on his clothes, sighed, walked to the tree, picked up the big grass basket that was extremely different from his small body, and skillfully carried it on his back. He turned his head to look at the red sun in the distance, stood for a few minutes, and then turned around. His small body lifted up like a ghost, with shadows on every step, ignoring the potholes in the mountains. With this strange step, he walked straight to his home at the foot of the mountain like walking flat ground. Sway, I'm back after picking today's wild vegetables. The little boy walked steadily, pushing open the old wooden door while raising his voice and shouting towards the inside. What are you shouting? What time is it? The imagined response did not appear, but another deep and hoarse male voice impatiently came from behind the curtains that were only separated by layers of torn fabric. The little boy paused and watched as he lifted the curtain and walked out of the burly man. He opened his mouth and calmly called out, "Dad." The man wearing a torn robe slowly walked to the table with an empty wine bottle, poured himself a glass of water, and drank it with his head up. The sunlight poured into the room from the window, illuminating the man's waxy and haggard features, revealing a long time without shaving his beard. Her hair, covered in some dust, was disheveled like a scrambled chicken coop. Her eyes were bloodshot and lifeless, with a dull gaze and a drunken aura. It was only when it landed on his calm, pampered son that a dim light quietly flashed through her murky eyes. Her voice hoarse as she spoke, "That girl only had a high fever yesterday and is still asleep." There was no concern or other emotion in the man's voice, as if he casually mentioned someone else, as if it was not his own daughter who was sick. The little boy's indifferent expression shattered upon hearing this, and he became worried. He pursed his lips and said, "Then I'll go and warm up today's medicine for my sister first." The man let out a and stumbled back to his room full of alcohol. He watched as the man lifted the curtain and left, without first going to warm the medicine. Instead, he went to another small room and walked to the edge of the bed. He reached out to the arched ball, brushed away the soft hair against his forehead, and poked his back to confirm that the temperature was normal. He breathed a sigh of relief and quietly left the room. After the little boy left, the little girl who was sleeping soundly on the bed covered in a blanket slowly opened a pair of clear blue pupils, with a hint of initial awakening inside. "He went to give you warm medicine. He's such a good brother." A soft voice echoed in the little girl's mind, with a hint of a smile rather than a smile. Upon hearing this, the little girl closed her eyes and replied to the voice in her mind, "If his name wasn't Tang San, I would be even happier. But there's no way, who calls him the son of fate?" The son of fate. The little girl closed her eyes and lay motionless on the corpse. She is not actually from this world. She is a lonely soul from the 22nd century, who died suddenly and traveled through the night due to a liver-mobile game of Yin and Yang Masters. She was born into this world where soul power is the main focus and strength is paramount. Just like in her previous life, her name is Tang Sui. Before realizing that she had worn the anime she had watched in her past life, Douluo continent, she really liked this brother who truly loved and cared for her. Due to her weak physique since childhood, although she has been alive for over 5 years, she has been dragging a weak body and suffering from various illnesses. However, her brother Tang San has never mentioned giving up or abandoning her. She is truly touched and cherishes this hard-earned family relationship. However, upon realizing that their family's seemingly familiar experiences, familiar names that made her eyelids twitch with her father and brother, and some exposed little actions could match a certain anime she had watched in her previous life, she was struck by lightning. Damn it! Her biological brother is actually Tang San, the protagonist of the Meiqiang revenge script. What is this little loli who doesn't even exist in the original anime and sways when the wind blows? I'm sure the canon fodder that won't survive a single episode has no place to run. After learning the truth about the world, Tang Sui became autistic for a while, but not completely. Because she wore her own Yin Yang style divine cub shell. Face spirit pneumatic tire. What is speaking in the brain now is one of the 7 ability masks inherent in facial spiritual energy, representing the fox face of wisdom. She had not seen the other masks since she had her own consciousness, and for the past 5 years, it had been the fox face communicating with her consciousness. It's almost the awakening day of Tang San's martial soul at the age of 6. You and Tang San are twins. Did you choose to go to the awakening together and continue to lie down and hide? Fox's face spoke again, and Tang Sui opened her eyes, fixed her gaze on the gray ceiling. After a while, she flipped over with a small blanket and softly said, "He's my brother. What can I do? Of course, we can only go together." Perhaps after awakening her martial soul, her weak and sickly body can also be improved. However, will she have a martial soul? Carrying doubts, Tang Sui fell asleep again in a daze. Mian also remained quiet in Tang Sui's sea of consciousness without making a sound. The room suddenly returned to its previous silence, leaving only the occasional sound of the wind blowing through the wooden window, making a squeaking sound. Bang 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 bang. The crisp sound of hammering echoed inside the cabin, and Tang San vigorously swung the small hammer in his hand, continuously hitting the same spot on the hot iron. Tang Hao, are you busy? Just as Tang San forcefully and accurately swung and hit the same spot, making the final drop, the voice of the elderly came from outside the house into his ears. With a creak sound, the wooden door of the cabin was slowly pushed open from outside. The old man with a wooden cane standing at the door was spirited and saw Tang San smelting refined iron. His eyes lit up and he said, "Xiao San is also here." Tang San picked up the towel hanging around his neck and wiped the sweat beads rolling down his cheeks. He greeted the old man with a smile and said, "Grandpa Jack." Old Jack, the village chief of Holy Soul Village, takes good care of his siblings on weekdays. "Hello Grandpa Jack." A soft and sticky voice followed closely from behind Tang Sanxi. Old Jack looked at the little girl who was sitting with a small stool not far from Tang San to help wash wild vegetables. She should have been a lovely little girl named Yushua, but now due to her congenital weakness and illness, she looks much smaller than Tang San of the same age. Her face remains pale and sickly as before, as if she can easily collapse in the wind, which is really heartbreaking. Sui, are you helping my brother wash vegetables? Sui is really sensible. Old Jack's wrinkled face flashed with heartache. Just as he was about to continue speaking, Tang Hao, who walked out of the room, interrupted him with a dull voice. "What's up?" "Off topic. If it's important, let's go over it again. Don't raise the QAQ, it will be raised to death. Just sign a card every day and it will be wide, waving the flag and shouting, end of this chapter." Chapter 3. Martial Soul Awakening. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 3. Martial Soul Awakening. Looking at Tang Hao, who looked disheveled, old Jack's gentle expression changed and he stiffened his face with a serious expression. He said with resentment, "Tang Hao. With such a young child, Sui's body is already weak. How can you let her wash vegetables on her own?" Tang Hao's face remained unchanged, and his dull eyes swept over Tang Sui, who was obedient without saying a word. His voice became impatient and he said, "If we can't even do this well, we'll still have no hope in life. With this sickly appearance, we're afraid we'll be gone before we leave this village." Tang San, who was wiping his sweat, frowned upon hearing these words. "This is a bit excessive for my younger sister." And old Jack, who was listening to Tang Hao's speech, was even more eager to argue with Tang Hao. He was just interrupted by the protagonist of the topic before he even started. "Grandpa Jack, you must be looking for Dad for something, right?" Tang Sui spoke crisply. A pair of clear blue eyes looked into old Jack's burning eyes, like a basin of water, instantly extinguishing the fire in old Jack's heart. Old Jack thought of his purpose and immediately said with a straight face, "Tang Hao, the third and Sui are both about to turn 6, and should they also participate in the martial soul awakening ceremony? I know Sui is weak, but the third has a great future. Don't give it a try. If any rare auxiliary martial souls are recruited after awakening, Sui's weakness can also be recovered through later medicinal herbs or other means, right?" Upon hearing this, Tang Hao, who had originally intended to be irritable and refuse, swept over Tang Sui's pale and thin face. The refusal on his lips turned into another sentence. "As you please." Over the years, he has also tried to secretly bring rare medicinal herbs to Tang Sui's daily meals and soup, but none of them have been effective. But since both little ghosts want to go, let them give it a try. Watching both siblings staring at old Jack with sparkling eyes and asking questions, Tang Hao hunched his back and walked into the inner room. At this point, old Jack, who had already talked to his siblings, said with a smile, "That's settled. I'll come pick you up in 3 days." Tang San nodded, and only when old Jack couldn't bear to wave his hand away did he show a clear expression of joy. He took his sister's slightly cool little hand and said, "Great Sui. If one of us awakens a healing martial soul, you don't have to worry about getting sick in the future." Even though he tried to search for suitable herbs to nourish Sui's body in the back mountain, the most suitable herbs that existed in his memory were nowhere to be found here. If one can awaken healing martial souls, it will save more things. Tang Sui looked at Tang San's rare expression of joy and nodded, 3 days later, old Jack, along with his siblings and several other 6-year-old children from the same village, arrived at the Martial Soul Branch Hall near Nodding Village. The children of Holy Soul Village, standing in a row, eagerly looked at the young man standing at the long table, including Tang San and Tang Sui, who were squeezed to the far left corner by other children from the same village. They also stared at the young soul master named Su Yuntao without blinking. Su Yuntao's gaze fell on the 9 children standing in front of him, scanning them one by one. In the end, Tang Sui, who looked particularly petite among a group of children of the same age, paused for a second as if she were not a 6-year-old, and her eyebrows furrowed invisibly. Is this girl really 6 years old? Shouldn't I have sent my martial soul awakening before I was 6 years old? As the inspector and deacon of the Martial Soul Hall, helping ordinary people awaken their martial souls is his necessary job. For him, there are also children who were sent to awaken their martial souls before reaching the age of 1. Tang Sui is not an exception. Su Yuntao, who withdrew his gaze, began to introduce himself, cleared his throat, and said loudly, "Children, my name is Su Yuntao, a level 26 soul master. I am the one who guides your martial soul awakening. No matter what happens later, don't be afraid because I am here." As Su Yuntao finished speaking, a blue light suddenly burst out from his eyebrows, extending upwards and sinking into his meticulously combed hair. His entire aura suddenly changed. A lone wolf, possessed. The green light flickered, and Su Yuntao's black hair instantly turned gray, growing and growing rapidly. The hair of the same color suddenly appeared on his bare arms, dressed in the standard uniform of the Martial Soul Hall. The seemingly harmless muscles suddenly swelled, bulging his clothes. His hands turned into wolf-like claws, and his eyes turned into solitary wolf's erect pupils, emitting a faint green light, startling the nearby child. A circle of white and yellow light shone from under his feet, which was his soul ring. This is the martial soul. The emotions seen in anime are different from those seen with real eyes. Tang Sui looked at Su Yuntao, who was stabilizing the other frightened children while explaining and taking out the awakening item from the package on the table, and suddenly felt a different ripple in her heart. If she awakens her martial soul, the weak and sickly buff on her body may really work. Sui, it's your turn. Tang San looked at his sister, who seemed to be stunned by Su Yuntao's changes, and touched Tang Sui's back, gently patting and comforting her, calling her back to life. Tang Sui regained her senses and walked to the center of the formation laid with 6 soul stones, under the gaze of Su Yuntao, either crying or harboring malicious intent. Let's get started. Su Yuntao infused soul power into the 6 soul stones, and Tang Sui, who was standing at the center of the formation, closed her eyes. All the noisy sounds in her ears seemed to disappear, and a dead silence surrounded her. Energy injection detected. System sleep has ended. Congratulations to the host for awakening their demonic power and restarting the system. The sound of machinery suddenly rang out. Tang Sui opened her eyes, but what caught her eye was not the beautifully decorated small room, but a deep and secluded darkness. "You're here." The soft voice came from far to near, and Tang Sui lifted her head, with a jade-white mask carved into the shape of a fox in her eyes. The tail of the fox mask's eyes is outlined by a touch of red color, pulled into a slender angle, and a faint flame shines in the hollow eyes, like a real fox squinting and laughing, exuding a sense of deceit. Fox noodles. As a face spiritual kitchen, Tang Sui is familiar with this mask. It is the fox face that has been with her since birth, representing wisdom. She looked at the fox's face and reached out her hand, as if trying to touch the mask. However, in reality, Tang Sui touched the blue crystal ball that Su Yuntao had placed on the table. Buzz. The dazzling soul-full radiance instantly illuminated the entire room, dazzling like daylight. D. Touching important items. Congratulations to the host, awakening one of the twin martial souls with innate soul power, your dear little mask. The slightly raised mechanical sound represents the good mood of the system at this moment. Tang Sui stared blankly at the mask floating in her palm. It's not in the shape of a fox, nor is it the other mask shapes that come with her familiar facial aura. It's a plain-looking totem that hasn't been carved into any shape, with an additional circle of blue-silver grass-like totems embellished on both sides of the jade-white mask. The rest is not rendered with any bright colors. Off-topic. Add a note on the origin of the wave face spirit style god. Initially, when the girl received the masks, she only treated them as friends, but later the masks sensed the girl's inner fragility. Under the temptation of the masks, the girl's originally clear heart gradually darkened. In the end, the girl merged with the mask and became a demon-faced spiritual energy asterisk. Dunyang, end of this chapter. Chapter 4. Who has tears in their eyes? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Who has tears in their eyes, mask. The first time he saw such a novel martial soul, Su Yuntao was surprised for a moment. He regained his senses from the joy of obtaining a good seedling with innate full soul power. His eyebrows furrowed tightly, and he did not feel any energy from the mask suspended in Tang Sui's palm. He immediately released his eyebrows and sighed, saying, "Come on, there's no special spiritual aura. It doesn't seem like a spirit-acting martial soul, and it's probably a useless martial soul that can only be seen and not used. But if you practice it well, with your current appearance, you should also be able to become a host in the soul fighting field when you grow up, and find a way out for yourself." Su Yuntao looked at Tang Sui's skinny appearance and thought for a moment before suggesting. Tang Sui blinked and regained her composure from the moment she woke up with a strange mask, quietly gripping her left hand. Just now, the system said its twin martial souls. Yes, it is. Congratulations, we are breaking away from your premature death and taking the first step towards true survival. The mechanical sound that only she could hear continued to conjure up flower sprinkling effects in her mind, as if celebrating. Tang Sui instinctively breathed a sigh of relief, but upon realizing what the system had just said, she suddenly widened her eyes. Early death. Tang San, the last one to awaken Wu's soul and test his soul power, was not surprised. He was also the same as the original animation. He awakened the blue-silver grass called the abandoned Wu soul and the same innate full soul power. At last, the two people followed old Jack out of the Wu Soul branch hall in Su Yuntao's regretful eyes. Of course, Tang Sui was still carried back by Tang San. Along the way, Tang Sui lay on Tang San's back, closing her eyes and recuperating. In fact, she was quietly talking to the system, understanding the ins and outs of her journey with the offspring of the Yin Yang Master, the Shell. Due to indescribable reasons, she has indeed died in the 22nd century and has been reincarnated into one of the face spirit chi monster races. In addition, her parents have different bloodlines, making her a mixed race of 3. The original, face spiritual energy, shell was really just a shell, and it only came to life with the arrival of her soul, without any replacement or original body. After her reincarnation to Douluo continent, she could have lived smoothly, but unfortunately, she was reincarnated as the sister of the Son of Fate, which was implicated in a causal relationship. People who do not belong to this realm have connections with the fate sun of this realm, and the heavenly way begins to correct and return to her original position. The first step is to weaken her physical condition, and the second step is to constantly suffer from various illnesses. The third and fourth steps in the future will make her move towards the end of death. Unless she possesses a true recognition of her own realm, martial soul and soul power. If she hadn't taken the path of awakening her martial soul this time and left herself in a small room, waiting for her ultimate outcome, she would have died of illness. Just now, one of the deadliest death flags had died prematurely, but the correction of the rules of the heavenly way did not stop, and the thorns that brought death still lay ahead. If we want to survive, if the host continues to live, only by constantly becoming stronger and gaining recognition from the pillars of this realm can he truly avoid the outcome of death. The system told her so. Who often has tears in their eyes? Ah, so it's her. Tang Sui yawned, tears of rationality overflowing from the corners of her eyes. Slowly, leaning against Tang San's back emitting a faint warmth, I closed my eyes to follow the rhythm of my walk. Pop. What are you saying? Is your awakened wasteful martial soul blue-silver grass? The glass wine bottle fell to the ground and cracked open. The noise woke Tang Sui from a deep sleep and opened her sleepy eyes. Her soft and sticky voice carried a hint of unease, subconsciously calling out the names of her close relatives. Brother. Off topic. Starting today, it's already midnight. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Canon Ashes script she really taken. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Canon Ashes script she really taken. In front of the table in the living room, Tang Hao changed his dejected appearance and excitedly gripped Tang San's right wrist. In Tang San's palm appeared a blue-silver grass martial soul. Tang Hao stared at it, fixed his gaze, and muttered to himself, the blue-silver grass is actually the same as her. She. Upon hearing this sentence, Tang Sui's somewhat chaotic brain suddenly became clearer, and she realized who Tang Hao was talking about. Sui, did you wake up? Tang San heard Tang Sui's babbling in his ears. Just as he was about to turn his head to look, Tang Hao in front of him suddenly stood up and quickly turned around and walked into the inner room. The large movements made Tang San, who was close, almost fall unsteadily. Dad. Tang San looked at Tang Hao in surprise with a loud bang and pulled the door curtain tightly, making it impossible to see the inner room. Tang Sui tilted her head and walked off the exclusive rocking chair that Tang San had made for her. She stood beside Tang San, pulled his sleeve, and deliberately raised her voice, saying, Dad's gone. Brother, I can feel if there is still a martial soul on your left hand. I want to see if your other martial soul is the same as mine, brother. What? Hey Sui, do you also have a martial soul? Tang Hao, who had already locked himself in the room, and Tang San in front of Tang Sui were both startled. This also is very spiritual. The next second, the door curtain was suddenly lifted, and Tang Hao's red eyes indicated that his emotions seemed to be very excited just now. Only his dull expression could tell his shock at the moment. You. Brother, I want to see. Tang Sui ignored Tang Hao and looked up at Tang San with clear blue pupils. Tang San raised a faint curve at the corner of his mouth, seeming somewhat helpless, but like Tang Sui, he deliberately ignored Tang Hao and ignored him. He looked at himself as if he had just made the blue-silver grass appear. He lifted his left hand and a small black hammer floated out of his palm. That is a hammer with a completely black body. The handle is about half a foot long, and the hammer head is a cylinder, which looks like a miniature cast hammer. However, on the black surface of the hammer, there is a special light, and a faint pattern is coiled around the cylindrical hammer head. Oh, this little hammer seems to look different from mine. A soft and sticky voice intervened, and Huaguang reappeared, appearing in Tang Sui's palm like the black and red hammer in Tang San's hand. This is. Tang Hao's pupils suddenly shrank, his heart like a big clock, being struck hard. Even if the color changed, Tang Hao still recognized the other martial soul in the hands of the siblings. The Haotian hammer. Tang Hao's breath involuntarily froze, and a lively light appeared in his turbid eyes for the first time. Twin martial souls. My children are all twin martial souls. What a small probability this should be. An inexplicable sourness and excitement surged in Tang Hao's heart, and he extended his arms to embrace the two of them. But unexpectedly, just as he reached out his hand, the mini hammer in Tang Sui's hand was blown away like flying sand by the wind, and she closed her eyes and suddenly fell forward, accidentally falling into Tang Hao's arms. Sui Sui. Sui Sui. Anxious voices spoke in unison from one big and one small mouth. This is the first intimate title that Tang Hao has called in front of them since Tang Sui was born. But Tang Sui could no longer hear any other voices, and before fainting, there was only one thought in her heart. That's just holding back. Good. She also released her martial soul, but within a few seconds, she fainted. The other martial soul hasn't even been released yet. She did indeed take the canon fodder script QAQ. Off topic. See you tomorrow. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Mysteries. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Mysteries. Dad, is your sister okay? Tang San nervously watched as Tang Hao reached out his hand and placed it on the pulse of Tang Sui's wrist, as if checking the other person's physical condition. He dared not rush forward, but a hint of discord flashed in his heart. Isn't Dad a blacksmith? Why do we also use pulse detection to check our physical condition like a doctor? At present, Tang San, who was born with full soul power but did not understand how to use this power, did not know that Tang Hao had actually released his soul power and swam around Tang Sui's body, checking the situation. After receiving feedback that Tang Sui was too weak and physically unable to support her release of the powerful mainland's first weapon, the Haotian hammer, Tang Hao breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Tang Sui's pale and bloodless face, let alone the fat cheeks of other children of this age. His dry lips moved and he felt a little guilty. Over the years, he has been immersed in the sorrow of losing Ian, and he does not welcome Ian and the two children he gave birth to, who are connected by blood. Because seeing these two children, especially the eyes of his youngest daughter that resembled his wife, Tang Hao would be moved by the scenery and recall the pain of losing his beloved once again. Escape seems impossible to happen to Tang Hao, but the reality now is that his escape has caused 2.5 children to suffer along with him. A heavy feeling swept through his heart, tormenting him with guilt. Tang Hao's other hand holding the handle of the chair exerted a slight force, and the sturdy wooden chair guard suddenly cracked into fragments. Dad! Tang San was surprised by Tang Hao's unintentional display of strength, and his heart was filled with doubts. However, the thought that Tang Hao was a blacksmith and needed the necessary strength to make iron suppressed his doubts this time. Tang Hao regained his senses and felt the dampness and heat on his side face. He raised his hand and rudely wiped the hot tears that overflowed from the corners of his eyes at some point. He exhaled a long breath of turbid air and turned around, holding on to Tang San's young shoulder. He solemnly asked, San, do you want to become a soul master? Tang San hesitated for a moment and looked at Tang Hao. He doesn't want to deceive his father about his life's path choices. After hesitating for a moment, Tang San nodded. Tang Hao let out a sigh, and his face, which looked even older, showed complex emotions that eventually merged into one sentence. Remember, no matter which path you choose to take, you must use your left-hand hammer, always protect the grass on your right hand, and also protect your sister. Do you know the Tao? Speaking of Tang Sui, Tang San's small face stiffened with a calm demeanor that did not match his appearance and age. He solemnly promised, I will definitely do it. No one can harm his family again. Seeing his son's posture, Tang Hao opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something more, but in recent years, the only remaining communication between father and son has been those few daily sentences. The words of concern were difficult to express, so Tang Hao had to shift the topic and focus his attention on Tang Sui. Sui should wake up after sleeping. When she wakes up, I will call you over again to inquire about her wishes. If his child was born so outstanding, both twins would have twin martial souls. In that battle, he had an idea to verify, but it had to be after Sui woke up. Tang San nodded. Just as he was about to bypass Tang Hao and pick up Tang Sui, Tang Hao took a step and reached out his hand. With his sturdy bronze arms, he easily lifted Tang Sui from the wooden chair, held her in his arms, and walked towards the inner room. Just leave it to me, little girl. You just released your martial soul for so long. Let's go take a good rest and sleep first. When I wake up from sleep, I still have something to tell your siblings. Tang San, who was about to catch up, immediately stood in place, watching his father holding his sister away from him. His gaze fell on the wooden chair armrest that had just been crushed by his father, and he crouched down thoughtfully, twisting up the debris on the ground, his gaze flickering slightly. No matter how strong the blacksmith's strength is, it is unlikely that the wood will be crushed so neatly. It feels like being oppressed and exploited by some force into crumbs. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Has this been taken away? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Has this been taken away? During this sleep, Tang Sui woke up only in the evening when dim lights lit up in the room. You're awake. The soft and gentle voice of the fox's face rang out in her mind, and Tang Sui opened her eyes. Her shaking vision froze on the familiar and dilapidated ceiling, with a hazy awakening in her eyes. He has been guarding you for a long time. Tang Sui turned her head and looked at Tang Hao, who had moved a wooden chair and sat next to her small bed. She leaned her elbow against the armrest of the wooden chair, supported her head, and closed her eyes, seemingly dozing off. Dad. Tang Sui moved and withdrew her hand from under the thin quilt. However, with such a slight movement, Tang Hao suddenly opened a pair of cold and malevolent eyes. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became chilly, but the next moment it returned to its original temperature. Sui, you're awake. A rough and hoarse voice overflowed from Tang Hao's cracked lips, and his eyes, which had lost their sharpness and were full of red blood, turned around, and his gaze fell on Tang Sui. Upon hearing this slightly intimate nickname from Tang Hao's mouth, Tang Sui was taken aback for a moment. Her clear blue pupils blinked, like a newborn deer in the forest, curious about the unfamiliar world. Looking at Tang Hao, her gaze was completely unfamiliar, as if she had seen him for the first time. Fox face, he hasn't been taken away, has he? Tang Sui, who was staring blankly at Tang Hao, asked Fox Noodle in her mind. The fox face remained calm and answered Tang Sui's question about the finally activated system after 6 years. The soul scan result is Tang Hao. He was not taken away as the host. Tang Hao, who was staring at his youngest daughter, frowned slightly as he read the emotion, "Are you calling me?" on her face. However, thinking of his indifference towards his siblings in recent years, he remained silent for a few seconds, turned his head, stood up from the wooden chair, and walked out of the room. Since you're awake, then get up. I have something to say to you and the mistress. Watching Tang Hao's hunched back, which seemed to be several years old, Tang Sui lowered her eyes and propped herself up from the bed. With a sickly pale face and a slightly curled black hair that was bedridden, it appeared slightly petite and cute. It should be about the twin martial souls. Tang Sui's memory of her before fainting is still clear. So she carefully climbed down from the bed, reached out and hastily plucked the curled black hair, and then walked out with her slightly curled black hair. Sui. As soon as he arrived at the living room, Tang San, who had heard the sound of Tang Sui's room coming out of his own room earlier, surrounded him with bright eyes and held Tang Sui's hand. His fingers rested on the pulse of Tang Sui's wrist without leaving a trace. After confirming that he was just a little weak, he let go of his worries. You all sit down. Tang Hao scanned Tang Sui's pale face and spoke softly. Tang San and Tang Sui nodded and sat on small benches, looking at Tang Hao. Facing the gaze of his siblings, Tang Hao was not embarrassed either. His always murky eyes faded away for the first time, revealing a clear and sharp light. He scanned his siblings carefully and said, "I called you here mainly to confirm something with you. Today, you have all tested your martial souls, and they are still twin martial souls. So in the future, do you want to become a soul master?" It is indeed this. Tang San's mind was clear, and he turned his head, just in line with Tang Sui's gaze. The eyes of the siblings collided in mid-air for a moment, then they all turned their heads to look at Tang Hao and said in unison, "I want to." Off-topic. I slept until the afternoon and then went out again. Tang Hao actually pays attention to Sui Sui and Xiao San, but it's quite awkward. But he was more immersed in the pain of losing his lover. See you tomorrow, end of this chapter. Chapter 8. A family does not harm a family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. A family does not harm a family. Facing the firm gaze of the two, Tang Hao's fingers on the wooden table trembled, and many emotions flashed in his eyes for an instant, eventually turning into a hint of solemnity. "So, I want you to promise me that no matter how you cultivate your soul power in the future, you will not apply any soul rings to your other hammer martial soul, or even let anyone see its appearance, let alone let others know that your siblings are twin martial souls. Can you do this? Here we go." Tang Sui had already anticipated it, and after Tang Hao finished speaking, she decisively nodded her head and said, "I know, Dad." Seeing Tang Sui agreeing so quickly, Tang Hao hesitated for a moment and looked at his calm little daughter with a hint of probing tone. "Why didn't you ask me why you did this?" Tang San's heart twitched and he also looked at his sister who was sitting obediently in a chair. Tang Sui, who was being watched, blinked and said, "Anyway, Dad won't harm me and my brother Duck." Tang Hao paused, and an inexplicable warmth surged in his heart, spreading throughout his chest. The little daughter's trusting gaze fixed on him, inexplicably making him feel the urge to cry. He turned his head and said in a slightly muffled voice, "Just remember for yourself." With Tang San's eyesight, he naturally saw the shimmering gleam hidden among the messy black hair. Father Tang San sighed and looked at Tang Hao with a new sensory gaze, asking, "Dad, where is my blue silvergrass martial soul?" Tang Hao still didn't look back and said, "You can use and cultivate the blue silvergrass martial soul as you please. It's not a problem to apply any martial soul. Twin martial souls don't require soul rings to increase their soul power in order to continue cultivation. As long as one martial soul has a soul ring, the bottleneck of soul power enhancement will disappear. Sui Sui is the same. Just use your mask martial soul. Unless both of you are in danger of life, never use that hammer martial soul." Speaking of which, Tang Hao paused for 2 seconds before waiting for his siblings to continue saying anything before starting to rush people. Alright, tonight's dinner hasn't been made yet. I've already finished what I want to say. What should you do? He's so awkward." Tang Sui turned her head, glanced at her brother Tang San, and then silently walked away. The trajectory of fate remained the same. The next day, Tang Sui saw Tang Hao start teaching Tang San how to smelt and how to hammer. She originally wanted to join in the fun, but unfortunately she secretly went to see Tang San swing the big iron hammer for practice. She quietly tried to take it down, but even if she blushed, she couldn't lift the hammer and instead exhausted herself. So Tang Sui had to give up the idea of learning the chaotic cloak hammer technique under the dual laughter of Fox Face and System. During the day, she held her small face dejectedly and looked at Tang San, who was becoming more familiar and agile in wielding the hammer. The night was as cold as water, and Tang Sui, who had been touching fish for 3 days, lay on her own small bed, looking out at the quiet moonlight outside the small wooden window, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. Awakening the martial soul and activating the demonic power is the first step to survival. But what she remembers is that awakening the martial soul does not mean becoming a soul master. To start practicing, one must obtain the first soul ring. Due to her weak physique, even though Tang San had plans to teach her Xiantian internal skill together, all plans were lost in the first step. Perhaps because she was of mixed race, she was unable to cultivate internal power. As for the demonic power, host, the cultivation of demon power and soul power is different. The words of the system echo in my mind. Tang Sui gripped the small quilt and remained motionless for a while. Creak. The door latch of the small wooden house was carefully opened, making a slight sound. A petite figure walked in the scattered moonlight, and the small shadow gradually stretched out. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Follow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Follow. As Tang Sui carefully pushed open the door, Tang Hao, who was sleeping in his room, suddenly opened his eyes. The sharp light flashed away, and the temperature in the room cooled down for a moment before quickly recovering. It's already late at night, who will visit? Do you think so? Did the people from the Martial Soul Hall come over? Not good. Thinking of his son and daughter who were still sleeping in this house, Tang Hao's face changed slightly. He quietly flipped up from the bed and moved out of the room in the blink of an eye, quickly arriving at the door of his siblings. Fortunately, the house was already relatively small, and Tang Sui and Tang San's rooms were very close together. Standing at the door and pushing open the door, one could see both of their rooms at the same time. The soul power wrapped around the wooden door and was carefully pushed open without making any sound. The eldest son Tang San had his back facing the door, his small body covered in a thin quilt, and his breathing was steady, as if he was sleeping soundly. And the youngest daughter's room Sui. Tang Hao's face changed when he saw that there was only a sunken small quilt left. He immediately understood who had caused the sound of pushing the door he had just heard. That girl. Even in summer, it's still late at night and cold in the wind. What are you doing outside at this time? Tang Hao, who let go of his spiritual power, walked rapidly, each time landing on the ground without making any sound or leaving any footprints. Found it. The second shallow breath that did not belong to the stillness of the night was captured by his perception. Tang Hao hurriedly swept towards the direction of the forest, and a huge and pitch-black hammer was already in his hand. This is his martial soul, the Haotian hammer. Tang Sui was still a child with short legs, so there was no need for Tang Hao to chase after her. With just a few quick steps, Tang Hao saw the little one holding an ugly old cloth tied up into a doll, swaying and walking on the path in the forest. Azu. The frost in the forest at night was heavy, and Tang Sui, wearing a patched skirt, tightened her grip on the doll. Her nerves tensed as she listened to the trembling sounds from the dense bushes and the low growls of some unknown soul beasts. I didn't turn on the navigation, don't lie to me, I can't recognize the way. The soft and tender voice of Tang Sui appeared somewhat abrupt amidst the monotonous chirping of cicadas. Tang Hao, who was about to use his soul power to startle his little daughter and let her know that he was afraid, stopped crying and went home. His eyes narrowed slightly, he let go of his spiritual perception, and his sharp gaze scanned the quiet forest around him. Who is Sui talking to? In the sea of spiritual consciousness, the fox's face guiding Tang Sui gently shook and said, how could I deceive you? I was born because of you. You have become stronger, which is beneficial for me and you. Tang Sui hugged the birthday gift doll that Tang San gave her last year and sucked on her red nose. Because there was no one else to say this in her heart, she directly spoke out the conversation. Before coming out, the system also assured her that if other strangers were found within the detection range, it would definitely sound a reminder. Therefore, Tang Sui temporarily let go of her worries. I don't know why, she just has a trust and intuition in the system, thinking that it won't harm her. Receiving all of Tang Sui's psychological activities and already detecting the system following Tang Hao. It will remind strangers, but does it seem that Tang Hao is not a stranger? Off topic. I'm a bit busy today. This is the more QAQ point. The fan next door should only be worn out in the middle of the night. The little ones can watch it tomorrow. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Strange misunderstandings increased. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 10. Strange misunderstandings increased. The deeper into the forest, the smaller Tang Sui's steps became. The dark night was quiet and gloomy, and the wind blowing through the forest made people shiver. Even the faint moonlight could not save the even darker forest in such a gloomy environment. Ahem. The howl of wolf-like soul beasts started somewhere and spread far and wide. Tang Sui nervously hugged her ugly doll, wary of the surroundings. The peaceful forest and tree shadows in the daytime seemed to produce countless mysterious shadows against the backdrop of night. From her perspective, looking towards the path completely shrouded in darkness behind her, the flickering light occasionally drifted through the trees, like the flames of the undead, frightening. Can you come out? Tang Sui stopped and asked crudely towards the void. Tang Hao, whose figure was hidden between the intertwined tree trunks, paused and a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. Sui found him. How could it be? She has only awakened her martial soul and has not even started practicing soul power. Is it difficult? Are you calling the guy who secretly instructed Sui to go out at night? As soon as this idea appeared, a hint of killing intent flashed uncontrollably in Tang Hao's eyes. The system that detected Tang Hao's killing intent paused and poked the fox face lying in the sea of consciousness. Then, Tang Hao saw his little daughter suddenly shining with a little light under her feet. A white jade fox-shaped mask emerged from the void, and her narrow eyes were adorned with a hint of crimson, emitting a faint glow in the dark night. Masks. Tang Hao was somewhat surprised, but quickly realized that this was another martial soul awakened by Tang Sui. However, how could Sui talk to the martial soul? The martial soul is dead, not a soul beast. How can we have a conversation? Is it because of Sui's poor health and lack of contact with other children in the village, and her longing for friends, that she regards her awakened martial soul as her own friend? After all, children's minds are always filled with many strange ideas. The more he thought about it, the greater he felt the possibility. Tang Hao looked at Tang Sui's pale face, which was not even the size of his palm, shining brightly as he looked at the mask's martial soul. A sour emotion surged in his heart, and his heart also twisted into a ball. It is said that my daughter is a thoughtful little cotton jacket. This child should have been spoiled and grown up by him and I. In thinking of his indifference over the years, Tang Hao suddenly felt a bit hesitant to look at his little daughter. And this ignorant Tang Sui is discussing with Fox Noodle to let the other party shine and use it as a ready-made unethical navigation, tour guide. She is not afraid of ghosts. She has watched many horror movies in her past life, and every time she calmly treats them as dinner movies. She was just a little afraid that there might be unknown soul beasts lurking in these bushes attacking her. You should know that she is now in dire straits, with no soul power, no demon power, and only a weak chicken medicine jar body. If she is caught and there are no other people here, what should she do if she hangs up? It's unclear why she doesn't want to die. Although she had just awakened her demonic power and became a monster of the face spiritual energy race for the first time, she felt that at least after summoning the mask, she could still block the sword for her. As for the usage of the mask, slowly explore it. The fox face that sensed Tang Sui's thoughts. The mask floating in mid-air shook its body, and the golden red color dotted at the end of its eyes seemed even more enchanting. The curved corners of the mouth carved on the mask also rose slightly, highlighting the fox's laughter to the fullest. Only Tang Sui could hear the soft voice in her mind, okay. Upon seeing this, Tang Sui's face burst into a smile and she softly said, "Thank you." Seeing this scene, Tang Hao's heart suddenly became even more painful. Sui indeed regarded her martial soul as a friend. End of this chapter.